The linen dress hung like a secret in the back of her closet. When Mei Lin finally wore it to the design competition, whispers followed her through marble halls. They dismissed her as an outsider until her nimble fingers revealed what generations of her family had known. True mastery leaves no room for doubt. The judges stood speechless. The crowd fell silent. And in that moment, everything changed. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. The air in the Altissima Moda headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a sea of designer labels and perfect blowouts. Helena Castro stood at the edge of the crowd, her handmade linen dress a stark contrast to the sequins and silk surrounding her. A soft breeze from the rooftop garden ruffled the simple rose-colored fabric. "Excuse me," a tall woman with a clipboard said, barely glancing at Helena. "Staff entrance is through the back." Helena smiled politely. "I'm a guest." The woman's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched. She looked Helena up and down, taking in the modest seams, the absence of logos, the practical sandals, and frowned. "Your name?" "Helena Castro." The clipboard woman scanned her list, then reluctantly nodded. "Very well. The presentation begins in 30 minutes. Helena moved further into the space, past clusters of fashion editors and social media influencers, who parted around her like water around a stone. Their conversation paused momentarily as she passed, resuming with pointed glances in her direction. "Is that what passes for fashion in the provinces?" someone murmured. "Must be someone's assistant," another voice replied. Helena pretended not to hear. She approached the refreshment table, where champagne flutes glinted in the afternoon sun. A server offered her a drink, and she accepted with a quiet, "Thank you." Across the room, Valentina Ramos held court, her sleek bob swinging as she laughed. 5 years ago, they had been classmates at design school. Now Valentina was the face of Altissima Moda, the brand that bore Helena's designs but not her name. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room. Valentina's smile faltered for just a moment before she turned away, drawing another admirer into her circle. The first humiliation came subtly, as Helena knew it would. "Everyone, please take your places for the presentation," the event coordinator announced. "VIPs in the front row." As guests moved toward the runway, Helena found herself being gently but firmly guided toward the back. A PR assistant with an earpiece touched her elbow. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable back here," she said, her voice sweet but dismissive. "We need to keep the front rows clear for influential guests and press." Helena allowed herself to be repositioned behind a column where her view was partially obscured. From this vantage point, she could see only glimpses of the runway where her designs would soon appear. "Don't worry, honey," a middle-aged photographer whispered, misreading her expression. "We all start somewhere. Keep showing up, and maybe next season you'll rate the second row." Helena said nothing, but her fingers traced the seam of her dress, the invisible French seam she had perfected over hundreds of hours of practice. Her grandmother had taught her that technique, along with countless others, in their small workshop in São Paulo. The lights dimmed. Music pulsed through speakers. Valentina stepped onto the runway in a blaze of spotlights. "Welcome to the Altissima Moda Spring Collection," she announced, her voice amplified through the space. "What you're about to see represents the future of sustainable luxury, a vision that came to me during my travels." Helena closed her eyes briefly. Those had been her travels, her vision. But she had signed the contract, creative control in exchange for anonymity. Valentina brought the connections, the financial backing, the face that fashion magazines wanted to photograph. Helena brought the talent. It had seemed like a fair trade at the time. The second humiliation came during the reception that followed the runway show. Helena was examining one of her designs on a mannequin, a flowing jumpsuit with intricate macrame detailing, when she overheard two fashion bloggers speaking nearby. "The craftsmanship is incredible," one said. "Valentina is a genius. Did you see that macrame technique?" I asked her how she learned it, and she said it's a family secret passed down from her Brazilian grandmother. Helena's hand froze on the fabric. That lie cut deeper than the others. The technique had indeed been passed down, but through Helena's family, not Valentina's. "Excuse me," an imperious voice interrupted. Are you supposed to be touching the merchandise? A senior editor from a major fashion magazine was staring at Helena with thinly veiled disdain. I was just admiring the work, Helena replied. Well, perhaps admire with your eyes, not your hands, the editor sniffed. These pieces are valuable art, not department store clearance items. Several nearby guests turned to watch the exchange, amusement playing across their faces. Of course, Helena said, stepping back from the display. My apologies. The editor looked pointedly at Helena's dress. Are you with one of the vendors? The catering staff, perhaps? Before Helena could answer, Valentina materialized beside them, champagne in hand. Is everything all right here? She asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Your caterer was manhandling the displays, the editor said. Valentina's gaze flickered to Helena, a flash of recognition and warning passing between them. She's not with catering, Valentina said smoothly. She's an old friend, from school. How charming that you still keep in touch with everyone, the editor said. Well, the collection is magnificent, Valentina. Such vision, such authenticity. Thank you, Valentina replied, accepting the praise without hesitation. As the editor moved away, Valentina leaned close to Helena. What are you doing here? She hissed through her smile. I came to see my work, Helena replied simply. We had an agreement. You stay in the studio, I handle the public side. I just wanted to see people's reactions, to feel connected to what I create. Valentina's expression hardened. You're making everyone uncomfortable, Helena. You don't belong in this world. The words stung, but Helena kept her face neutral. That's where you're wrong, Valentina. This is my world too. I just navigate it differently. Valentina glanced around nervously. Leave before you cause a scene. Please, we can talk tomorrow at the studio. With that, she drifted back to her admirers, leaving Helena standing alone by the display. The third humiliation, the one that would change everything, came as the evening was winding down. A young reporter approached Helena as she stood by the exit, preparing to leave. Excuse me, he said, digital recorder in hand. Lorenzo Diaz from Fashion Forward. I couldn't help noticing your dress. Helena looked up, surprised to be addressed directly. It's unusual, he continued. In this crowd of designer labels, you're wearing something different. May I ask about it? Before Helena could respond, Valentina appeared at the reporter's elbow. Lorenzo, she exclaimed, I see you've met my former classmate. Helena is one of our production assistants, so dedicated she even comes to our events on her day off. Hi. Reporter's interest visibly dimmed. Oh, I see. Actually, Helena said quietly, this dress is my own design. Lorenzo looked between the two women, sensing tension. Really, he asked. It's quite simple. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, Helena quoted. At least that's what I believe. Valentina laughed, too brightly. Helena dabbles in sewing, a hobby really. Lorenzo, have you seen the statement piece from the finale? Let me show you the inspiration board. Before you go, Helena said to the reporter, would you like to know what inspired this dress? The reporter hesitated, clearly torn between following the famous designer and hearing out this unknown woman. Oh, Helena, Valentina said, her voice honeyed with condescension. No one wants to hear about your little homemade projects. This is a professional event. Several nearby guests had stopped to listen, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to amusement. Actually, Lorenzo said slowly, I'm curious now. Valentina's smile became fixed. Helena was just leaving. No, Helena said, her voice gaining strength. I wasn't. The small crowd grew as people sensed drama unfolding. Helena felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but kept her expression calm. In fact, Helena continued, I'd like to tell everyone about my little homemade project and all the other projects I've created over the past 3 years. Valentina grabbed her arm. Don't do this. Helena gently but firmly removed Valentina's hand. It's time for truth, don't you think? She turned to face the gathered crowd, which now included several major fashion editors and influencers, their phones already raised to capture whatever was about to happen. My name is Helena Castro. I'm not a production assistant. She took a deep breath. I'm the chief designer and founder of Altissima Moda. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Valentina's face drained of color. "That's absurd," Valentina sputtered. "Everyone knows I started this brand." "Everyone knows what you told them," Helena corrected. She turned to the reporter. "This dress uses a traditional Brazilian smocking technique called Casinha de Abelha, beehive house. My grandmother taught me when I was 6 years old." Helena walked to the nearest display where one of her evening gowns hung on a mannequin. "This embroidery pattern, it's based on the tile work in my hometown square. And this," she continued, moving to another design, "incorporates macrame techniques that have been in my family for 4 generations." The crowd had fallen silent, all, eyes moving between Helena and Valentina. "Check the inside seams of any piece in this collection," Helena challenged. "You'll find a tiny bee embroidered near the label, my signature. Valentina wouldn't know to look for it because she's never actually made any of these garments." Lorenzo stepped forward. "Is this true?" Valentina's composure cracked. "We're partners." She agreed to stay behind the scenes. "As the silent designer, yes," Helena acknowledged, "but not as a non-existent one, not when you're claiming my family's techniques as your own." Helena reached into her simple handmade purse and pulled out a worn sketchbook. She opened it to reveal page after page of detailed drawings, the very designs that had just walked the runway. "Every piece in today's show was conceived and designed by me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "The sustainable sourcing practices, the zero-waste pattern cutting, the fusion of traditional techniques with modern silhouettes, all mine." She handed the sketchbook to Lorenzo, who began flipping through it with growing amazement. "These are dated months ago," he said, "with technical notes, fabric swatches." "Because I'm not just a face," Helena said. "I'm a craftsperson. Every stitch, every seam, every drape is intentional." She turned back to Valentina. "You brought connections and capital. That was our deal. But you didn't create these designs, and you have no right to claim my heritage as your inspiration." The crowd had grown larger now, with phones recording every word. Valentina looked around desperately, seeing support evaporating with each passing second. "This is ridiculous," she tried again. "Helena is confused. She helps with production, but ask her to show you how the macrame on the jumpsuit is constructed," Helena interrupted. "Or how the zero-waste pattern for the evening gown works. Ask her anything technical about these designs." Valentina's silence was damning. Lorenzo turned to Helena. "Can you show us?" Helena nodded. She moved to the jumpsuit display and began explaining. The intricate knotting technique, her fingers working with practiced precision as she demonstrated with a loose thread. "The pattern creates both structure and flexibility," she explained. "It took 3 prototypes to perfect the tension so the garment would move with the body while maintaining its shape." Her hands moved swiftly, confidently, the hands of someone who had done this thousands of times. Several fashion editors leaned in closer, their expressions shifting from skepticism to fascination. "The thread count matters," Helena continued. "Too thick, and the knots become bulky. Too thin, and the structure collapses. This particular thread is custom spun by a women's cooperative in northeastern Brazil, another detail that wouldn't appear in any press release." She moved to the evening gown next, turning it inside out to reveal the construction. "Traditional pattern making creates up to 30% fabric waste," she said. "This design uses interlocking pieces that maximize every square centimeter of fabric. The scraps become the embellishments you see here on the bodice." Her demonstration continued for nearly 20 minutes, during which she explained technical aspects of construction, material sourcing, and design philosophy that only the true creator could know. By the time she finished, the crowd had grown to include nearly everyone still at the event. Valentina had retreated to the edge, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. Lorenzo's recorder was still running. "Why come forward now?" he asked. Helena looked around at the attentive faces, the same people who had dismissed her hours earlier. "Because truth matters," she said simply. "Because the hands that make our clothes matter. Because my grandmother's techniques aren't marketing points, they're living heritage." She smoothed the skirt of her linen dress. "And because somewhere there's another designer being told they don't belong in rooms like this. I want them to know that they do." The silence that followed was broken by a slow, deliberate clap from the back of the crowd. A distinguished older woman stepped forward, the editor-in-chief of the fashion industry's most respected publication. "Extraordinary," she said. "Both the designs and the revelation." She turned to Valentina. "Is this true? Has Ms. Castro been the actual designer all along?" Trapped by too many witnesses and too much evidence, Valentina gave a terse nod. The editor turned back to Helena. "Why agree to such an arrangement in the first place?" Helena's shoulders straightened. "Creative freedom. No interference from investors who wanted to commercialize my vision. Valentina offered to be the face while I maintained complete creative control. And now I want recognition for my work," Helena said. "And I want to build a brand that celebrates the artisans and techniques that made these designs possible." The editor nodded thoughtfully. "Come see me tomorrow, 9 a.m. She handed Helena her card before walking away. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with the scandal that would dominate industry headlines by morning. Lorenzo was already typing furiously on his phone, the exclusive story taking shape under his fingers. Valentina pushed through the crowd toward Helena, her eyes blazing. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. Helena shook her head. "I've reclaimed what's mine. There's a difference. The investors will pull out. The retailers will cancel orders. You've destroyed your own work." "Or liberated it," Helena countered. "We'll see which." As Valentina stormed away, Helena felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. Her hands, calloused from countless hours of work, no longer needed to remain hidden. The aftermath was immediate and physical. Helena's legs trembled as the adrenaline began to fade. She found a quiet corner and sank into a chair, her breath coming in short gasps. The room seemed too bright, too loud. A glass of water appeared before her. She looked up to see a man about her age, camera hanging around his neck. "Thought you might need this," he said. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse. "Lucas." "Mendez," he introduced himself. "Freelance photographer." Helena took a sip of water. Were you here for all of that?" He nodded. "Every word." He hesitated, then added, "I remember you know, from design school. You always had the best construction techniques in the class." Helena studied his face, recognition dawning. "You used to help me photograph my portfolios in your mother's flower shop. The lighting was good there," he said with a small smile. Her hand shook slightly as she set down the glass. "I can't believe I just did that." "I can," Lucas said. "Your work deserved it." Around them, people were still talking, many casting curious glances in Helena's direction. Some approached cautiously, introducing themselves, offering business cards, asking questions that Helena was still too overwhelmed to properly answer. Her phone began buzzing incessantly, messages, calls, social media notifications exploding as the story spread. "It's too much," she whispered. Lucas nodded in understanding. "Do you want to leave?" "More than anything." He offered his hand. "I know a side exit." Helena let him lead her through a service corridor and down a freight elevator, away from the cameras and questions. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. "Thank you," she said when they reached the street. "Where to now?" he asked. Helena looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. "I have no idea. Everything's different now." "That's generally what happens after revolutions," Lucas observed. "Even the small personal ones." Helena laughed. Sound of relief, disbelief, and something like joy. "I need to call my grandmother," she decided. "She should hear about this from me, not the internet." Lucas nodded. "And after that?" Helena considered the question. "After that, I start building something honest." 6 months later, Helena stood in her new studio, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and abundant natural light. The walls were lined with sketches, fabric samples, and photographs of artisans from her home region. In one corner, her grandmother's old sewing machine occupied a place of honor. The scandal had indeed rocked the fashion world. Valentina had retreated from public view after a half-hearted apology statement. Several investors had pulled out, as predicted, but others had come forward, intrigued by both Helena's designs and her story. The editor-in-chief had been true to her word. featuring Helena in a major spread that focused not just on her designs, but on the ethical production methods and traditional techniques she championed. The article had positioned her as the vanguard of a new movement in fashion, one that valued transparency and craftsmanship above celebrity. Helena moved between workstations where a small team of artisans, many recruited from her hometown, worked on pieces for the upcoming collection. She stopped to discuss a technique with an older woman who was teaching a younger apprentice. "The tension is critical," Helena emphasized, demonstrating with her own hands. "Feel how the fabric responds." Her phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. His photography business had grown alongside her brand, his documentary-style images of the artisans and their processes becoming an integral part of her marketing approach. "Ready for the site visit?" The message read. Helena smiled. They were opening a small production facility and training center in her hometown next month, a project that would create jobs and preserve traditional techniques that had been disappearing. She texted back, "Meet you there in 30. As she gathered her materials, Helena caught sight of herself in the studio mirror. She still wore simply constructed clothes of her own design, but she carried herself differently now. No apologies, no shrinking. The intercom buzzed. Her assistant's voice came through. "Helena, the journalist from Sustainability Today is here for your interview." "Send her in," Helena replied. She welcomed the reporter into the studio, offering coffee and a tour of the workspace. Unlike the fashion events of the past, where she had been overlooked and dismissed, here Helena moved with quiet authority. "Your story has inspired so many emerging designers," the journalist noted as they walked. "Especially those from non-traditional backgrounds. That means more to me than any commercial success," Helena replied. They paused before a bulletin board covered with letters and messages from young designers around the world. "What would you say to someone who feels excluded from the industry?" the journalist asked. Helena considered the question carefully. "I would say that authenticity is your greatest asset. The very things that make you different, your background, your perspective, your techniques, those are your strengths, not liabilities." She ran her hand along the edge of a work table. "And I would say that true craftsmanship speaks a language everyone eventually understands. Excellence cannot be dismissed. Forever." Later that afternoon, Helena visited the small boutique where her designs were sold. Unlike the massive production runs of mainstream fashion, her pieces were limited in number, each tagged with the name of the artisan who had constructed it. A young woman was examining one of Helena's dresses, running her fingers over the detailed embroidery. "It's beautiful," the customer said when she noticed Helena, "but I don't recognize the designer name." "It's still relatively new," Helena explained with a smile. "The craftsmanship is amazing. You can tell someone really cared about making this." "That's the highest compliment we could receive," Helena said. As she left the shop, Helena passed a magazine stand where her face looked back at her from a cover alongside the headline, "Helena Castro, Fashion's Authentic Revolution." She didn't stop to buy a copy. She had work to do. That evening, Helena taught a community class in the back room of her studio. 12 students of various ages and backgrounds watched attentively as she demonstrated a smocking technique on a piece of fabric. "Remember," she told them, "it's not about speed, it's about intention. Each stitch is a decision." A teenage girl in the front row struggled with the technique, her frustration evident as her stitches came out uneven. "I can't get it right," she muttered. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." Helena knelt beside her. "Do you know how many times I had to practice this before I mastered it?" The girl shook her head. "Hundreds," Helena said. "My grandmother made me undo and redo until my fingers ached, but with each attempt, I improved a little." She guided the girl's hands through the motion. "There, feel the difference?" A small nod. "Good. Now do it again." As the class ended, the same girl approached Helena. "Why do you bother teaching us? You're famous now, you could just hire people." Helena smiled. "Because knowledge kept in one set of hands eventually dies there, but knowledge shared grows and evolves." She packed away her teaching materials. "And because someone once told me I didn't belong in fashion's inner circles. I want to make sure that never happens to anyone with genuine passion and willingness to learn." After everyone had left, Helena remained in the quiet studio. She ran her hand over the dress form that held her next design, a wedding gown commissioned by a client who had specifically sought out Helena's unique approach. Lucas found her there, lost in thought. "Long day?" he asked, setting down his camera bag. "Good day," she corrected. "Meaningful." They walked out together, locking the studio behind them. The street was quiet, the frenetic energy of the fashion world far away. "Do you ever miss it?" Lucas asked. "The glamour? The spotlight?" Helena shook her head. "I was never in the spotlight until I claimed it on my own terms." She looked up at the clear night sky, where stars were now visible beyond the city lights. "Besides," she added, "true craftsmanship doesn't need applause to have value. It just needs to exist, to be used, to be passed on." Lucas nodded in understanding. "And yet, the world applauds anyway, only because authenticity has become so rare that it stands out," Helena replied. "In an industry built on image, actual substance becomes revolutionary." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. "Your grandmother would be proud," Lucas said finally. Helena smiled. "She is. But do you know what she said when all this happened? About time you stopped hiding your stitches, girl." They both laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet street. The simple truth that had eluded Helena for years now seemed so clear. In a world that often valued appearance over substance, the greatest rebellion was to insist on being exactly who you were, with all the skill, knowledge, and heritage that entailed. No disguises, no apologies, just craft, honestly shared. In the window of a closed shop, Helena caught her reflection, a woman who no longer stood in shadows of her own making. The journey from that rooftop event to here had been less about gaining recognition and more about shedding pretense. The dress they had mocked was still hers, but now, so was everything else she created, and that made all the difference.